documentary is very much an ongoing discussion, and there are within a kind of a documentary context there are various protocols. Like if you're making a documentary for TV, or in fact any sort of public interaction, there's various processes that you need to go through. So release forms and approval that subject is agreeing to you using their voice and their image. Because as all of you know, if you've done any editing, even with fiction context or non-fiction context, it's all untruth. It's one image up, there's another image. The montage produces an energy, produces a fleet. So even though you're trying to represent the truth as best as you can, it's always subjective and open to interpretation. So I can talk as a sort of filmmaker in terms of the ethics that apply to my practice, and I would say that Neil, is in truth probably a lot more slippery in terms of the ethics, but ultimately there is a responsibility to the subject who you encounter and the representation of that subject. Are you exploiting them? Are they aware of the context that this image is going to appear? Is there a kind of acknowledgement of and respect for the subject? And these are questions that certainly some of the portraits in the front room bring to the fore. At what point does, if by me taking a photograph, what exchange happens, and then what happens in relation to that image appearing in the context of a gallery space in a completely different country, be that Gertrude contemporary. So it's a very sort of tricky terrain, and it's very particular to the artist in question. So in the instance where I've made documentary films, it is of kind of critical importance that the relationship with the subject, so those people within the documentary, for me, that they're comfortable with the representation. So in my experience, I've made, half a dozen sort of broadcast documentaries, and all of the subjects are still friends of mine. They're people who I'm still very comfortable, having a friendship with, where a lot of documentary filmmakers will push beyond a sort of level of comfortability in order to get a result that may be more sensational, maybe closer to the truth, who knows. But I think every practitioner has a threshold with regard to what is ethical. There's a famous documentary that you may or may not know of, and it's never sort of found itself within the context of a gallery, but it's called The Good Woman of Bangkok. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is probably a great one to think about the ethics of filmmaking, or in fact the gallery. And that is, it was a middle-aged man who called Dennis O'Rourke, who I think he passed away a couple of years ago, who, using government finance, decided that he wanted to make a portrait on, or a film on, the sort of sex trade in Asia Pacific, in Bangkok in particular. So he sought the services of a solicitor, a prostitute, and then proceeded to use her as the subject of the film, and he developed a relationship with her. Now, you just need to kind of even consider just slightly the ethical implications of that film, and it will fold your brain, because ultimately, the result of the film was incredibly successful and brought a great deal of kind of scrutiny to this particular issue, I guess. So it, there's many ethical questions, and I guess it's one that art historians and film theorists and critical theorists more generally are always grappling with. And again, I think it gets more and more slippery, particularly with digital technologies and the sort of access to images
and to consumer
precisely
recording devices.
Without those checks and balances, they're no longer, you don't have these very controlled, mediated outlets for media, for film. There's so many different contexts with which you can ingest material.
Just some background on Amiel, his age, and
Amiel is
because 17 years, but he was actually very young when he started.
He was super young, So he was so I think he's probably in his late 30s, mid to late 30s, and just been quite prodigious. And again, the reason...
I think younger 30s, wouldn't that be, or not?
Is he? I'm just trying to think, maybe 35? I don't know what year he was born. So 2000, so he would have been 20... You do the math for me, 21-ish in 2000, when he made the first film, 2002, so that's, he'd be kind of mid-30s, and just, in a lot of ways, I see, well, a lot of people, even though he sits very much in a cinema context, his process, in terms of sort of sitting on the edges of life and disciplines, very much an artist in the true sense of the word.
His parents are both artists, aren't they?
That's true, yeah. And consistently, he's won multiple awards from the first one through to Rural and Hale, and just very rewarded in terms of his work. And interesting to sort of place him in collaboration with me, I guess, to a certain degree, in the context of the gallery. Like, what does you look at David Lynch, most recently had an exhibition up in Goma, and, comes very much from a visual arts background. And there's a sort of skepticism too associated with I guess, sort of artists of a particular discipline operating within a gallery context. And it takes a while for, I guess, sort of traditional audiences to kind of scratch their head and go, okay, so what does it mean to place the work of this practitioner within a gallery context? How do we spatialise and, interpret the moving image within a gallery context? Cinema is a very specific way of, kind of experiencing the moving image. You are captured, you sit there and you are kind of rolled through the narrative experience with the undulations of emotions and the music coming in. You're in control as a filmmaker of that. The gallery context, it's very ambulant, it's very, flavor. Generally, I think, in sort of, kind of statistics, an audience member will give a video piece maximum 10 seconds before moving on, and particularly if you go to a heavily saturated kind of biennale, that's definitely the case. So how do you, what sort of experience are you trying to create in order to have an impact on an audience member and how they interpret the work?
Have you got some idea about the sort of how much narrative or what length or what kind of that you would consider as too long for it?
Look, it's, look at Douglas Gordon's 24-Hour Psycho, so it's not,
Well, how much narrative then?
That's very subjective, so that's what
I know it is.
would encounter.
Yeah.
Look, for me...
Well, for an audience too.
For an audience to encounter a video work, I think the audience is becoming more sophisticated there's more of an expectation around video work that it has sculptural elements as well, that there are elements that push beyond just the sort of, single channel screen, that there's multiple ways to interpret the work. Narrative structure, a lot of video works don't even have a kind of narrative interplay. But for me, a successful video work, in terms of, and also other audiences that I've seen encounter on these, is that it has more than just the single channel. That it does have sculptural elements, or it has other elements that draw you in some way.
Well, so what was I going to ask you? Oh, if we're thinking about the political effects of this work, what do we? How? Perhaps we can throw that to the students as well.
Well, I'm curious to know. What's your interpretation of some of what you've seen in here?
I'm thinking sort of the politics versus pictorialism or spectacle.
Okay.
That balance between those two.
In terms of
the political effect. Well, is it? How does pictorialism
Okay, so I think I'm interpreting your
spectacle. Say maybe.
So I guess in some ways Emil's work has an element of voyeur, the voyeur sort of experiencing a life that otherwise you wouldn't encounter. But it's quite deliberate, certainly in relation to the death row portraits and also the death row, that there is incredible inequities in a class context within the US